Functions are blocks of code designed to perform specific tasks. Once a function is declared, the code within it only runs when the function is called. You can reuse the code functions every time they are called. The syntax for a function begins with the keyword function, followed by the name that you choose for the function. The name is your choice, but it should describe what the function does. It's common to use camel case for function names with more than one word. Also, you can't start a function named a number. Following the function name, you have parentheses that may or may not contain parameters. More on this later. This function doesn't have anything within the parentheses, so it has no parameters. Then within the curly brace is all the code that will run when the function is called. This is called a declared function. This function simply logs the message hello onto the console. Notice you must call it by name for it to run. This function here does the same thing, but this time it's called greetName, and it has a parameter called name. The value that comes into the function via the name parameter is used after the word hello in the console message. The function is called twice, and this time an argument is sent with each call. So the first time the function runs, name holds the value Ruby, and the second time, name holds the value Bob. The message shows up on the console for each function call. Here's another function named addIt. We have two variables, num1 and num2, which have been assigned the numbers 2 and 5. The function will add the two numbers coming in and return the sum of the numbers back to where the function was called. It's being called here. And once the value is returned back where it was called, it will be assigned to the text content of an h1 element on our HTML page. Notice when the function was called, two arguments, 2 and 5, were sent into the function by referencing the variable names num1 and num2. But when they came in as parameters to the addIt function, the parameters or value placeholder names changed to n1 and n2. You don't have to use a different name here, but in this case we did. And it's fine as long as you keep using the parameter names of n1 and n2 within the function code. Something interesting with declared functions, like we've seen here, you can actually call them before or after they're actually declared. This is called hoisting. For example, in all our functions so far, we have called them after the declaration of the function, but we can actually move the call above or below the function where it's declared, and it will find it later in the code just fine. Other types of functions cannot be hoisted, only declaration functions like we've seen so far. Let's look at some other types of functions. An expression function is the way to define a function as part of an expression. Here we have a function with no name, or in other words, an anonymous function. It is being assigned to a variable called add. With function expressions, you can pass a function as an argument or store a function in the data structure easily. How do you know if you should use an anonymous function? I'll usually ask myself, will the code in the function be used again in any other context, or need to be called from anywhere else in the code? If the answer is yes, then I would probably name it. If no, then an anonymous function is fine. The function ends in a semicolon here because the function is part of an expression. Also, functions used in an expression cannot be hoisted. You can call the function by using the variable name add the same way you called a declared function. You might also see an anonymous function in other ways. Here is an event listener using an anonymous function. Instead of calling a declared function name as the second parameter of the addEventListener method, the entire anonymous function is the second parameter. It doesn't need a name because it doesn't have to be called. It just runs when the event happens. Another type of function is the arrow function. It is useful for short, simple functions. The syntax is short and concise. Again, because arrow functions are part of an expression, they cannot be hoisted, and you should end them in a semicolon. This arrow function is being assigned to a variable called sum. Notice there is no keyword function It begins with the two parameters followed by an arrow, which is the equal sign and the greater than symbol. The code that runs when the function is called follows the arrow. There's no need for curly braces if the code that runs is a single expression. Here's an example with no parameters. If there is more than one expression to run in an arrow function, you will need curly braces. You will use functions often in code, and they are key to writing organized, maintainable, and usable code.